Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Judy Devine, and I am Sadler's Religion Webinar Coordinator and the moderator for this afternoon's webinar with Dr. Matthew Halbach. Dr. Halbach is currently the director of the St. Joseph Educational Center in Des Moines, Iowa. He is an accomplished writer and presenter on catechesis and theology, receiving numerous awards within the field. Today, he is here to speak about building a church of mercy. Before we get started, a few housekeeping notes. Everyone is on mute to minimize background noise. If you have questions, please type them in the question box. We are recording the presentation and will do our best, as long as technology cooperates, to get this up for you to view again and share with your colleagues, and that should be by Friday of this week. Those of you live with us today and online who stay for the entire webinar will receive a certificate of participation by the end of the week. It will be sent to the email you registered with. Now, without further ado, I am going to turn this over to Dr. Halbach, who will present Building a Church of Mercy. Thank you. It's all yours, Doctor.
Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I just want to start by taking a quick moment to pause and reflect on the need for mercy in our lives, in our schools and parishes. So let's take just a moment of silence. Okay. Thank you again for being here. It's a pleasure to be sponsored by Sadler. I'm a consultant with them. They do such good work, and I'm very privileged to be one of their webinar instructors. But let's get right to it. Becoming a parish or school of mercy is first and foremost taking a look at what is mercy, what does it mean for us, what is mercy from a biblical standpoint, and looking specifically at Pope Francis as an icon of mercy. We're going to do that through a few stories I'll tell. We'll then create or fashion a working definition or description of what mercy is, and then we'll spend the second half of this webinar talking about putting mercy into action. And what I mean by this is we will try to unpack what the Holy Father is talking about when he says the church, everybody, priests, religious, lay people, everybody needs to learn the art of accompaniment. It's so critical to who we are as church and how we evangelize. So again, we'll spend the first half talking about mercy, the second half talking about putting mercy into action, or in Pope Francis's lingo, accompaniment. So let's get started. Here we have that jovial face of Pope Francis. I sure love that smile. And he's, for me, certainly an icon of mercy. I think about Francis waving at people, smiling, kissing babies, hugging people. I remember in 2013, shortly after his election, there was a very popular photo that was viral on Twitter and Facebook of a man with a facial deformity, and the Holy Father embraces that man, presses him so closely to his own face, kisses the man's head. It was incredibly popular, almost to rival, which at the time was the incarceration of Justin Bieber. So I thought to myself, boy, if you're getting as many tweets and Facebook friend or likes as Justin Bieber and you're the Pope, you're doing pretty well, especially in our country. But people see in Francis, they see the warmth, they see the gentleness, they see the compassion, they see the mercy. To inaugurate the Jubilee Year of Mercy, Francis gave us that beautiful papal bull, the face of the Father's mercy. And that was the first line. Jesus is the face of the Father's mercy. One of the questions I want you to ask yourself in your own ministry is, how do I show the face of the Father's mercy? How do I show it, or do I show it? And certainly we'll talk about the importance of witness in a moment, but just for now, keep that question in the back of your mind. How do I show the face of the Father's mercy? So again, I would ask people, what is it about Pope Francis that you associate with mercy? A lot of them say he's real, he's genuine, he's sincere. When he says he cares about the poor, he shows it. He's out there, like his visit to the U.S., made a couple of impromptu stops in New York and D.C., one at a prison, another at a homeless shelter. When he says the people on the fringes of faith and society are important to him, he demonstrates that. and that really turns people on and opens up hearts, even jaded hearts or calloused hearts, opens up hearts to hope, to faith, and to the belief, and boy do we need it today, but the belief that God is alive in the Catholic Church, and through wonderful people like the Holy Father, and through you and I, who are striving to show that face of the Father's mercy. Here's a couple other reasons why Francis, I think, is a great champion of mercy. Certainly his unconventional papal style, we'll call it. Very simple. I mean, he showed up at the Vatican for the election driving an '84 Renault. I don't think you could get any simpler than that. Living in his apartment instead of the papal palace. His openness to dialogue. I don't know how often you dialogue with your students in religious education or in a school setting or whatever your ministry is, but dialogue is so key to showing the face of the Father's mercy. And by dialogue, not simply just hearing somebody out and then telling people what you think, but really, the word is empathy, really trying to get in someone else's shoes and see the world as they see it. Here's an example. Pope Francis carries on an ongoing dialogue with the former editor of an Italian journal called La Repubblica. La Repubblica publishes the dialogue, and the former editor is a publicly professed atheist. And Francis takes a lot of heat for carrying on a dialogue with someone who's very public about his unbelief. And people ask Francis, why bother? Certainly you have other things to do with your precious time. He says, I care about what this man thinks, and I want to know why he doesn't believe in God. And in classic Francis fashion, where he always keeps everybody on their toes, he says, who knows, maybe I'll become an atheist. And of course, everyone cringes, including people in charge of his communications and whatnot. I remember Monsignor Lombardi, who was the director of the Vatican Press Office, used to say, oh my goodness, I get heartburn every time Francis gets in an airplane, because he's going to give some kind of interview and who knows what he's going to say. But the point here is dialogue is an important aspect of showing the face of the Father's mercy. Empathy, being willing to see the world and understand it through someone else's perspective. Spiritual accompaniment, we'll spend the next half of the hour talking about that. That last bullet, though, Francis gives us two metaphors in particular in which he uses to describe a church that's more merciful. First, he gives the metaphor of field hospital, and that metaphor appeared first in the wonderful, lengthy interview with American Magazine in 2013. The interview was titled, A Big Heart Open to God. If you don't know what a field hospital is, it's what you imagine. It does all the things a hospital would do, but it's there on the front lines of a battlefield, taking care of the wounded and injured. Now, what we are quick to think of is, oh, well, Francis must mean the church then is busy about the work of healing, caring for the sick culture or cultures or the world or the secularized world. But he says, no, 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 no. First and foremost, we need to heal ourselves as a church. We need to heal ourselves. There's so much division at the top levels of church governance, all the way down to the rural parish, all the way down to the Catholic household. Divisions in terms of ideology. What do you really need to believe to be Catholic, in other words? Or what does Catholic identity really mean? Or how much do I need to, of the church's teachings, do I need to follow? And all sorts of questions that are raised around what does it mean to be Catholic and sort of who's in and who's out of the church and all this sort of silliness, frankly. When it comes down to it, it's about our baptismal beliefs, the creed. That is who we are as a Catholic church. Every time a baby or an adult is baptized and we read the creed, the minister of baptism then says, this is our faith. This is the faith of the church. And we all say amen to it. And Francis reminds us that pivotal or key or essential to that faith of the church is being a field hospital, being a place of healing for each other, which means we have to dialogue, which means we have to listen, which means we have to be patient, which means we have to foster open-mindedness, and we'll talk about these things later when we talk about accompanying people. Lastly, the metaphor of open door. I'd like to offer this question to you. What kind of a door are you? What kind of a door are you? What do I mean? Francis uses this phrase, open door, in his exhortation, Joy of the Gospel. And he says the church needs to be an open door. If you say the church needs to be an open door, essentially you're saying the people of God need to be open doors. The church isn't a building or simply a hierarchy. The church is the people of God, you and I and everybody else in it. So the question really is, are you an open door? And when it comes to your ministry, I would ask further, to what or to whom are you open, and to what or to whom are you closed? Doors can be open, locked, unlocked, shut, entrances, exits. Let me give an example. I used to ask the question with other groups, what kind of a door are you? And I had a 16-year-old young woman give the most brilliant and creative answer I think I've ever heard, and I've been giving this presentation for over a year. And she said, I am a stained glass door seen from the outside. People who don't know me see me as uninteresting, boring, pedestrian, easily overlooked, sort of all dark. But people who know me, then they know how important faith is to me, and they see all the bright colors, all the hope inside of me, all the joy, all the radiance. And I thought, good Lord, what a beautiful answer. And then, of course, nobody else wanted to raise their hand and offer their answer after this wonderful woman. It was like watching Jesus teaching the scholars in the temple or something, young Jesus at age 12. At any rate, I had a woman stand up after and say, I think I'm a trapdoor. And I said, what does that mean? And she says, well, I love to get in arguments about the faith, and I love to trap people. I love to catch them where they're wrong, and I pointed out to them. And I said, ma'am, I think you might be an exit door also. And, some people were kind of laughing, and then she just gave me this cold stare. And, of course, she didn't buy a copy of my book, but that's okay. The point is, we need to ask ourselves, what kind of a door are we in this field hospital of a church? Are we about the work of healing, which requires empathy, openness to discussion, openness to listening, patience? Are we fostering mercy? Are we being that face of the Father's mercy? So let's talk a bit about what's mercy from a scriptural perspective. Very generally speaking, it's an orientation towards the good of the other. Mercy in the Latin is misericordia, which translates into one's heart or core with the poor. Now, I already mentioned Francis's affinity and affection for the poor and the marginalized, but there's all kinds of poverty, as we all know. Having a wonderful moment to spend with the founder of the large community in Canada, he told me, people don't like to be around the poor, and I think he might have been quoting a bit from Dorothy Day, talking about her Catholic worker experience. And he's very frank, the poor are smelly, the poor are angry and bitter, and the poor can be ugly, and they can just be frightful sometimes. It's not a wonderful, pleasurable thing to serve the poor, but it's necessary. And then he went on to say, we avoid the poor because they reveal our own poverty. They're like mirrors held up to our faces. We avoid the poor because they reveal our own poverty. There's emotional, psychological, spiritual, social, relational, intellectual, cultural, spiritual poverty, all sorts of poverty. And each one of us has something about ourselves that's impoverished. And Francis says, look at the poor. See them as the gift they are. Let them reveal what's poor inside of you, and together find a richness when you show mercy to one another. Mercy includes forgiveness. The great story of the parable of the prodigal son, which I wish we had another hour for this webinar. I'd spend it just on that scripture study. But just a couple of points about this. There's 4 themes I want you to take away from this parable, which sometimes, because a parable or a line from the Bible is so familiar, we kind of close off our minds to any further meanings and insights. But try to open them up. And what I want to give you are 4 themes about this prodigal family. And I say prodigal family because not just the son, the younger son, but the father is prodigal. Go check out your Webster or American Heritage Dictionary and go find out there are 2 meanings of prodigal. And I believe this is the same in the Greek. One is reckless and wasteful, which is that younger son who squanders his share of the father's inheritance. But the other meaning, which is very surprising and very much like the father in this story, prodigal can mean lavish and excessively generous. Lavish and excessively generous. This father in our story is a sign or metaphor for God the Father. who, like the sower of the seed, sows his love, his grace, his mercy everywhere, even where the chances of sprouting and blossoming are almost nil. Yet the Father spreads that seed, and in this case the Father shows great, great mercy to the younger son upon his return. So 4 themes are this. When we show mercy, we got to be doing at least 4 things. One is going out, and we're going to talk about going out as an action of accompaniment. But as the story reads, the father is already searching for the younger son. And he sees him, perhaps he sees him on the edge of town or the village, and imagine him running out to embrace and kiss that younger son. And the son has this apology that he's been practicing, and the father cuts him off. He says, almost like he says, I don't care, but you know how it is. There's so much love there. The Greek there for the father's intense love is agape, this unbelievable self-giving and self-sacrificing love that the father has for his younger son. And he says to the servants, kill the fatted calf, bring the shoes, bring the robe, bring all these things, the rings, let's go, let's feast. So there's got to be a going out if we're going to be a more merciful church or a more merciful school. We have to go out and meet people where they are and give them what they need and embrace them if that's what they need at the time. We need to be willing to hear them. We need to be willing to listen, to touch them at times. I'm going to give a story about touch when we talk about going out as an action of accompaniment a little later. But we have to have a desire to go out. Now sometimes it means go out somewhere, but it can also mean go out of ourselves. And what do I mean by that? This is a little lengthy story, but it's worth telling. Sometimes going out means going out of your comfort zone, okay? This is probably a year ago at my parish, and we, for whatever reason, committed the cardinal sin of getting rid of coffee and donuts, and we brought it back some 2 or 3 years later, and when we did, it was like all the people said amen, and this great shout of acclamation goes up. People love their coffee and donuts. And it was at that Mass that I had this inkling to want to pray over my kids. And I put my hand on my oldest son's head, Mikey, and I prayed and I said, Lord, bless Mikey, let him know how much you love him, let him have a good week at school. Mikey opens his eyes and says, Dad, that was so peaceful, I wanted to fall asleep. And then he looks at me and says, can I pray over Benjamin? And I said, sure, thinking like, wow, look what we started, a little chain reaction of holiness and prayer here. So Mike puts his hands on Ben's head, and as you can imagine, Mike being 8 years old and Ben being the second youngest, the prayers begin to devolve. So Mikey says, Lord, and his face is so pained, so serious, Lord, would you help Ben play with just his toys? And Ben turns and prays over Jojo, and it's totally unintelligible. He just says the word pancakes 3 times. I mean, who knows what that means? And so on and so forth. And there are 2 women behind us that are having 2 completely different reactions. One woman's seeing this, and tears are coming down her cheeks, and she's giving the expression of, oh, how lovely this is, that this family is sharing the faith this way. The woman just a few persons down, she has her arms folded, she's glaring at me, and her brows furrowed, and her chin's down, as if to say, whatever you're doing, we don't do this in the Catholic Church. We don't do this at Mass. This is strange. This is bizarre. I've never seen this. And you know what? It bothered me. And I don't like confrontation, but I felt like I was being called to go out. In this case, go out of my comfort zone and go see what's going on with this woman. So I did. And she was surprised I came over to her. And I said, is everything okay? And she said, well, what was all this you were doing? And she held out her hands to mimic my praying over the kids. I said, oh, well, I was praying over my boys. And she goes, well, that looks Protestant to me. And I said, well, I don't think it has anything to do with Protestant or Catholic. Now, a little background note, I was in seminary twice discerning to be a priest, and then I met my wife, so obviously that call didn't take, and God had a different one for me. But the second thing the woman said to me, the question she asked was, well, are you trying to pretend to be a priest? And in my mind I thought, no, lady, believe me, I've already tried to be a priest. It's just not going to work out. I said, no, I wasn't trying to do that. I was just trying to pray over my kids. And she goes, well, that was distracting. And I said, well, I'm really sorry I distracted you. Then I found myself, you ever had that feeling when you're saying something, it's almost like an out-of-body experience. That you're saying something and you can't believe you're saying it, because I said to her, would you like to join my family for coffee and donuts? And then she was just as surprised and probably just feeling out of body like I was, because she said with a question, sure? Like she wasn't quite sure she should be going, or can't believe I was asking this question. So we joined each other for coffee and donuts, and 10 minutes into this, she reveals what all this hostility or that angry look she gave, what it was all about, what was all behind that. And she said the year prior that her husband had died and her oldest son had left the church, and it was just killing her. And so she was seeing me pray with my boys, and it was stirring up all these emotions. This was a small gesture, people, to go over to somebody and just ask how they're doing, invite them to coffee and donuts. Invitation is a key action of accompaniment we'll talk about a little later. These are small things. And at this point, I really want to impress upon you those beautiful words from St. Mother Teresa and also from St. Therese of Lisieux, that we do small things with great love. And when we do that, great things happen. Transformations happen. Parishes become more merciful. Schools become more merciful. Homes become more merciful. And when we can be merciful, we can evangelize more effectively. And we'll get to that in a slide or two. But go out. The second thing we see in the parable of the prodigal son is an encounter. We see the father meet that younger son, and there is when reconciliation can happen. Maybe it doesn't happen in the shape that you hope it does, but hopefully that's where it takes place. I'm sorry's are exchanged for I forgive yous. But notice that mercy is already being extended before apologies have been given. The father was already out looking for his son. That is a motivation, and again, go back to the scripture. It gives you that beautiful Greek word agape, which can mean desire. He's desirously looking for his son with great passion, and all he wants is for him to be home and to be safe. So going out, encounter. Third point is reception. Reception, receiving someone who has wronged us back into our life to whatever degree we are able. Sometimes the reception is, I finally, after 30 years, have been able to pray for this person, for their well-being. Maybe that's all we can do. Sometimes the reception's more intimate and celebratory, like it is in the parable of the prodigal son with the great feast. Fourth, and this is the really difficult one, to be merciful, to be an open door, to show the face of the Father's mercy, is to advocate for those who are unpopular. To advocate for those who are unpopular. You can certainly say, in other words, those on the margins of faith and society, but also those who just don't share similar attitudes and beliefs of maybe the folks around us. But to advocate for them. Look at what the father has to do. He just wants to celebrate his youngest son's return. Now the oldest son has a problem. This is unfair, he says. You've never done anything like this for me, he says, and I've never done anything to shame you like my younger brother has, and yet you're feasting. All of this anger, all of this hurt the older brother's feeling. And isn't it interesting that all the father's trying to do is be merciful? And I want to propose this, just keep this in the back of your mind. Jesus says something really interesting to his apostles, and I never quite understood it till I was putting this book together. He says, don't think that I've come to bring us peace. Don't think that I've come to bring peace. I've come to bring a sword. And that sword will divide fathers and sons, mothers and daughters, sisters and brothers. I submit, I think, honestly, that sword is mercy itself. Look at what trying to show mercy in this family did. It saved the life of one son, and it divided brother against brother and father against son. And Luke doesn't tie up the family dynamics, so we're not privy to what happened the next morning around breakfast, or if the older brother ever joined the festivities. We're just shown the immensity of the Father's generous, lavish love. Lastly, mercy as a way of holiness, as you see up there, the fourth bullet. I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you took the Sermon on the Mount, which is why you see a mountainous image there, and then a field-like or plain image, if you took the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew's Gospel and put it next to the Sermon on the Plain from Luke's Gospel, you'll see noticeable differences, but certainly similarities. Among the differences, probably one of the most important, at least one that jumped out at me in researching for the book, was Jesus comes to a climax in his Sermon on the Mount, and he says something almost like nonchalantly, as if it's just so darn easy to do. He says, so be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Yeah, no small task there. But if you look at Luke's version, he doesn't say that. Jesus says, you want to be perfect? Then be merciful. Be merciful as God is merciful. I don't know if we think about mercy as a way of perfection. I think we think about not sinning or just, limiting our sinnings to really small sins, like, sneezing on the salad bar or something really minor. If I can just mitigate or keep the number of sins really small and really minor, then I'm getting closer to perfection. The Sermon on the Mount plain wipe all that away and say that's nonsense. You want to be perfect? Be merciful. Because the measure that you measure out will be measured back to you. And we say this all the time in the Our Father. Forgive me as I forgive others. The solution or the answer or the way is mercy. Mercy. I can't talk about all these bullets today. I wish I could, I really do. That first bullet, though, I want to touch on and tell a story. Jesus is the face of the Father's mercy. Again, I mentioned that was the first line of the Pope's papal bull opening up the Jubilee Year of Mercy. If anyone has been to the National Shrine of the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C., then you know, as did I, who was a student at Catholic U, there is a huge, probably 75-foot tall mosaic on, I think it's the northwest apse. You can't miss it. If you're in the Basilica, you're going to see it from wherever you are. But it's Jesus risen from the dead, and that figure is so imposing, so intimidating that the Catholic U students lovingly refer to it as Angry Jesus. It's one of those deals where wherever you are in the Basilica, those eyes follow you. Now let me tell you about the rest of the picture if you're not looking it up on Google or something already. He's got his arms flexed, and he's got these huge biceps, so perhaps he's been working out in the underworld or whatnot, but he's got a furrowed brow. He's got a snarled lip. He's got flames, 3 flames coming out of his head. His body is draped in a red robe, and he's seated in the judgment chair, and he's ready to dole out judgment. And it's so intimidating. And I remember saying to myself out loud, that is so imposing. Why is this here? And the tour guide there must have overheard me because he comes over and says, do me a favor. I want you to start at the back of the Basilica and then walk down the main aisle and keep your eyes on the face of Jesus. So I did. And as you get closer to where you're standing just underneath that mosaic, you notice things that you wouldn't have noticed from far away, such as the other eye, depending on where you are, if you're looking right at it, it would be the right eye, is rounded. That part of the mouth is smiling. His face looks gentle when you're underneath, and that's amazing. And I said to the tour guide, what's that all about? He says, well, the artist wanted to convey the idea that those who think they are far away from God, they see angry Jesus. They don't know God. They know what they're afraid of or the God that they've conceived of in their mind. But that's not God. Those who know God know God's mercy, and they see that merciful face, the face of the Good Shepherd, the face of Jesus who forgives the woman in Simon the Pharisee's home, the face of Jesus who heals and cleanses the lepers, the face of Jesus who welcomes the children. That's the face of the Father's mercy. And that's the face we need to continue to contemplate and ask ourselves, do we show that in our ministry? How do we show it more intentionally? We're going to talk about that in terms of actions and attitudes of accompaniment. So here's what I did. I took some of these scriptural examples of mercy and I put together a working description, which is sort of the theme throughout my book, Becoming a Parish of Mercy. Ultimately, mercy is about making room for new opportunities, new life and blessing for others, especially those on the margins of faith and society. Mercy is about making room for others. Look at this image here on the right. It's a beautiful 14th century icon, Andrei Rublev, Russian iconographer, and it's of the Trinity. And we see an open space in the foreground, and we see that the bowl of the food has been pushed towards the edge of the table, inviting you, sit down, come and eat with us, stay with us, you belong. God has made room for us in God's heart. God's made room for us in his life. And now he's calling us to be open doors that make room for others. Sometimes it's making room physically for people who need material needs met. Sometimes it's making psychic space for people where we stop thinking about ourselves for 5 seconds and think about somebody else and their needs. But everywhere and always, it's about making room in our hearts for people, for new chances, new blessings, new opportunities, new life. I like that definition. It's as wide, and by the way, I'm going to make a comment about this question slide. If we would, because of the minimal time, I'm going to save 15 minutes at the end for whatever questions you might have. So we'll just gloss over this questions comment slide, and there will be another one that comes up at the end, so just bear with me. But keep that in mind, mercy as making room for people. Now let's talk about putting mercy into action. A few notes about conversion. Religious sociologists of religion, I would say, almost unanimously agree, and anyone who's familiar with the academy and people who are academic, it's hard to get them to agree about anything because everybody thinks with much scrutiny and writes so as to be seen and heard, and it's hard to get consensus. But in one thing we can find consensus, and that is the primary reason people convert to a new faith community, or a new religion for that matter, is because they believe that the relationships they will find will be more meaningful than their current relationships. Let me say that again. The primary motivator for people to convert to a new faith or a new religion is because they believe that the relationships they will find in this new faith will be more meaningful than their current relationships. Relationship drives evangelization. Relationship drives it, and it steadies it. We'll talk about relationship as a bedrock for evangelization in just a moment. But here we have a graph, and no, I don't think conversion is a nice linear line that just keeps going onward and upward. But in fact, if there's somebody out there who's had that as their life experience, give me a call or send me an email, because I'd love to get a picture with you, because then I can say I'm in a holy card, because you're a saint. But here we have in our graph on the vertical side, evangelize. These are the things we do to share the gospel message, which, by the way, is a message of mercy. Mercy is the reason the gospel is good news. And across the horizontal or bottom axis there, we see depth of relationship. Now, relationships are built on respect, love, and trust. These kinds of relationships are the bedrock of evangelization. Sometimes people refer to it as pre-evangelization or whatever, tilling the soil before the seed is planted, whatever metaphors you'd like to use, it's still true. We have to get to know the people we minister to, know their stories, know who they are, know what their anxieties and fears and joys and hopes and griefs are before we can begin to understand how they see the world, how they see God, how they see themselves, and before we can speak to that sight. Respect, love, and trust are the bedrock of evangelization. Meeting people where they are in the hopes of accompanying them, staying with them along the journey towards deeper conversion. Relationships take time. There's no way around this. I'm a father, I'm a minister, and in both cases I lie to myself every day when I'm frustrated because I want to see fruit. I want to see lives changing. I want to see kids getting a little more mature. I want to see adults stop acting like kids. I just want to see growth. And yet we're not planting full-grown trees. We're planting seeds, and that takes time. And you're only as credible as the witness you give. My goodness. Paul VI, I guess he's Blessed Paul VI now, all the way back in 1975, in a beautiful document on evangelization called Evangelization in the Modern World. He said, people today listen more to witnesses than they do to teachers. People today listen more to witnesses than they do to teachers. And if they listen to teachers, it's because they are first witnesses. What kind of witness do you give? What kinds of actions and attitudes do you embody on a daily basis in your ministry or at home in your personal life? What sort of face of God do you show? And if we're talking about kids or kids are a part of your ministry, my gosh, they're watching all the time. Again, going back to Mikey, my 8-year-old, right after this is the Easter season, we're celebrating the Easter Sunday Mass. We finally get to say Alleluia after that long period of Lent and dryness, the baptismal font's flowing again, and we're singing an Alleluia, which sounds a little more like a dirge, more like a funeral song, to be frank. And my 8-year-old tugs on my sleeve and says, "Dad, what does Alleluia mean?" And I said, "Well, it means," and I'm trying to whisper because everyone's singing it around. I said, it means we praise you, God, we bless you, God, we love you, God. And then he says, "So are we happy?" And I said, "Well, yeah." He goes, "Well, nobody looks happy." And I looked around at the people in our immediate pews, and faces are looking a little sullen, look tired. People are checking their watches as they're singing Hallelujah to the Lord. And so I feel like it's my job to start making excuses. And then I'm starting to wonder, how did I look or how did I sound when I was singing? And I'm certainly not advocating we all sing like a choir, like we're in a choir or something. We can make a joyful noise to the Lord too. But that our hearts are in this, that we've really lifted up our hearts. And so I say to Mikey, "Oh, people are tired, people have other things on their mind," and that sort of thing. And my 8-year-old, I kid you not, my 8-year-old says to me, "Well, I don't know about that, Dad. All I know is when you're happy and you know it, then your face will surely show it." And I thought, oh my goodness, what's this kid going to be like when he's 18? And he was right. He was right. What kind of face were we showing to each other when we're singing Hallelujah like it's a dirge? What are we really saying? And our kids are picking up that disconnect. We say one thing in the church, we're a body, we love the Lord, we serve the Lord, but with our actions and our attitudes, we show the opposite sometimes. And that disconnect is very disconcerting and sometimes even damaging to the faith. So we're always on, if you will. There's never a time we're not witnessing. Even when I sleep, I say I'm doing horizontal prayer. I mean, there's never a time. Once you're baptized, the light has been switched on, and it's never turned off. Here's what I really think conversion looks like for most people. It's a crazy, squiggly line that double backs and loops around and kind of meanders. That's a lot of people's journey right there. And what Francis asks us when he asks, "Are you going to be an open door?" He's asking, how will you track these people when they take a turn that you didn't want them to take, when they double back or take 2 steps back rather than 2 steps forward? What will you do? How will you respond? Will you show the face of the Father's mercy? If not, whose face will you show? This is what the journey looks like for a lot of people. And so Francis offers us a series of actions and attitudes. There's no list out there. I just curated a number of his homilies and audiences, his major writings, and pulled together some buzzwords. We'll call them Francis words. These are words he uses over and over and over to talk about accompaniment, to talk about evangelization, to talk about mercy. And what I want to say, let's relate those things. Let's put those 3 things together in some kind of a relationship. Mercy is the character of evangelization. Why? Because the message of the gospel is mercy. So how we share the gospel ought to be merciful. So mercy is the character of evangelization. Accompaniment is how we evangelize. Accompaniment is how we evangelize. Now, here we have a series of Francis words or buzzwords. These are words that come up over and over and over when talking about evangelization and accompaniment, etc. Look at what's at the top of the list and on down. Going out, inviting, welcoming anew. These aren't particularly Catholic words. These are just actions. Actions that people take whose doors are open to others. Actions that people take who cultivate an attitude of empathy. Actions that people take who try to show every day the face of the Father's mercy. Now what I did was group these actions, and there's all kinds of descriptions and quotes from Francis in my book, so you can read more about that in the book. But I grouped these actions together in 3 phases: encountering others, sharing faith experience, and discussing, debating the faith. In other slide presentations, I've re-articulated that last one to be articulating the faith. But the point is verbal expression of the faith, okay, in that 3rd phase. Now let's put that on our little line here of conversion. What's first? Those actions of encounter. Going out, inviting, welcoming, listening, serving. What comes after we've built the relationship that far? Now we've laid the bedrock where we can talk, or not talk, but share, model faith experiences, maybe share our own faith verbally. This is why God is so important to me. This is why I'm Catholic. This is why I'm joyfully Catholic. One of the things I say to parents more than anything else is share your faith story with your kids. And I mean the highlights and the lowlights. You don't have to go to confession to them, but talk to them about that windy journey. Talk to them about your double backs. Talk to them about when the road got too ambiguous and hard to see and you didn't know how to move forward. Talk about the times when you were on the right track, when you knew you were doing what God wanted you to do. Talk about the things that confuse you about your faith or that you don't understand, but yet you still come to Mass. Talk to your kids about those things. Share your own journey. So after encounter, we have sharing faith experience, and finally, articulating the faith, discussing, debating the faith. Now look where we are on the graph. Number 3, go put your finger or your index finger on number 3 and trace it straight down to the relationship line. That's a deep relationship. That's a relationship that's taken time to build, and credibility has been established. One of the things we've lost in our church is that credible voice, at least on the macro scale, through all sorts of reasons, and we know what they are, and we don't need to get into all that right now. But how will we ever get that credibility back? One baptized person at a time, living what they say. And back to that picture of Francis in that first slide, why do people think he's a person of mercy? Because he does what he says he will do. Because when he doesn't just talk about the poor, he goes out to them. He spends time with them. He embraces them. So often, teachers, catechists, parents want to jump to number 3 and say, here's the catechism, or here's the UCAT, or here's the lesson, learn it, and things will be well. You'll be an evangelized, happy Catholic. Not so. Not so. We need to know that you're a credible witness first. We need to know your own faith experience. We need to know we can trust you. We need to know that when you're happy and you know it, then your face shows it. We need to know that not just Jesus loves us, but that you do. Not just Jesus loves us, but that you do. Remember, accompaniment is how we evangelize, and relationship is the bedrock of evangelization. And so Francis also gives us, to go along with these actions, a series of attitudes: sacrifice, tenderness, joy, open-mindedness, etc. I want to tell one quick story about empathy here. Again, I know there's so much to say in a short amount of time, but I hope you're bearing with me. Again, it's doing small things with great love. I was pulling into the church at 4:59. This is about 10 years ago. At 4:59 p.m. for the 5 p.m. Mass on Saturday evening. And I wheel in and I climb in the back, try to be really inconspicuous. And there was a woman in front of me who was crying, and she cried through the entire Mass. I don't remember what the readings were. I don't remember what the homily was about. All I could think of was this person and her pain. And I received communion and came back to my pew, and I thought, are you going to do anything about this? Are you going to let her know that somebody sees her pain? And I decided I'm going to put my hand on her shoulder. Now, I had, like in the movies, you got like an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. Well, the devil was saying to me, boy, if you do that, that's going to draw attention to her. She won't like it. She'll think it's awkward. She'll get angry. She'll be embarrassed, whatever it is. And then the angel says, nonsense. Just put your hand on her shoulder. And I put my hand on her shoulder, and she didn't jerk her shoulder away. She didn't even look at me. She just grabbed my hand with hers and held on tightly, squeezed it. And it seemed like for 5-10 minutes. After the Mass, she looks at me and mouths the words quietly, thank you, thank you. Small gesture, great love. Imagine what your parish, your school, or your home would be like if people were in the practice of cultivating attitudes of accompaniment, actions of accompaniment, where the other person is our greatest concern, where we're fostering or showing the face of the Father's mercy is what we're worried about the most. What would your ministry look like if accompaniment was how you described what you do? If you say I'm chief accompanist, if you will, or chief companion, what does your day or week look like? Is it person-centered? Is it people first? Is it building relationships? Is it going out? Is it inviting and welcoming and listening? Is it praying with? Is it empowering people? Is it blessing people? Because guess what? We're all in that ministry. Sometimes with all of our administrative duties, sometimes with our lesson plans and everything else, all of that other stuff, i.e. accompaniment, gets pushed to the side. But that's the important stuff. That's the power. That's how we evangelize. And so I leave you with this idea that we are called to accompany others. No matter, whatever ministry you're in, or if you're not in any ministry. If you're a parent, if you're a friend, if you're a human being, you're called to be a companion. If you're a Christian, you're called to be a companion in Christ, which means we foster attitudes and actions that make the face of the Father's mercy visible. We have time for questions here. I do want to make a quick plug. I've got a copy of the cover of the book here. It's available on 23rdpublications.com, Amazon.com, and iStore. I hope you pick it up. Thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to hear your questions. And as I say, if mercy is about making room, thank you for making room for me. Now on to your questions.
Thank you, Matt. One of the questions we have is, first of all, can you repeat the 4 themes of the prodigal son story?
You bet. First is in going out. It's the first action of accompaniment. Mercy doesn't wait for apologies. Mercy is already moving us outward to meet people where they are, to offer them healing, forgiveness, liberation, whatever it is they need. And then second, encounter. Some sort of meeting of the mind, some sort of real coming together, because you can't accompany somebody from afar. There's no such thing as anonymous companions. We need to be an incarnate faith, which means everything about us, our bodies, our minds, our personalities, and our presence needs to walk with others. So encounter is critical. Thirdly, reception. Somehow, if someone has wronged us, we have to make a move to bring that person back into our heart, whether it's to the degree of, I've decided now I can pray for that person, even though they've wounded me so terribly, or receiving them in terms of that friendship we had is able to be reestablished, or our marriage, or our business association, whatever it is. Our love for each other, our respect for each other can overcome whatever this wound is. Lastly, advocacy. Mercy is always about advocating for those who are not popular, advocating for those who are marginalized.
Okay, the other question is, please state the name of the stained glass window.
I don't remember. She didn't tell me.
Okay, well, I figured that question might come up. It's called Christ in Majesty.
Oh, of the mosaic. Yes.
Yes, of the mosaic.
Yes.
Christ in Majesty, and
Christ.
You were correct. It's the North Apse,
Yep.
and it's the National Basilica.
Yep. And it's
in Washington, D.C., correct?
And I think it's Christ seated in majesty. But at any rate, yes, I thought you were referring to the young woman who described herself as the stained glass.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. The one that you mentioned in the
Basilica.
In the Basilica, yes.
Right.
And then I have a comment here. No question. Thank you for the book. I read it on a plane, and almost all of it is underlined. I'm reading it again with my parish council beginning tonight.
Wonderful.
We have decided that the year of mercy will not end in our parish.
Oh, amen.
And you've given us a lot to build on.
Amen.
And lots of thank yous for your time and what you talked about today.
Oh, sure. You're welcome, everybody.
Okay, any other questions? I'm just going to wait a minute, Matt, because sometimes something comes in last minute. You've given people a lot to think about. That is wonderful.
Good, good.
Yes. So Matt, that seems to be all of the questions. So with that said, thank you so much for your time and insight. Thank you so much, and God bless you. That's another couple of comments that are coming in. So on behalf of Sadlier, I'd like to thank Dr. Halbach for his presentation. As a reminder, the webinar will be posted by Friday of this week. Your certificates of participation will be sent out by the end of the week, the beginning of next. Thank you all for attending. Dr. Halbach, thank you for everything.
Oh, thank you, Judy, and thank you, everybody. God bless you.
God bless. Bye.